Yeah, my name's Gary Johnson. I'm an accident reconstructionist out of Birmingham. I work for a company called Vear, which just stands for Vista Engineering Accident Reconstruction. We're an authorized engineering company. Here's a short version of my resume. I got about 20 years of accident investigation and reconstruction. I'm working on my PhD in computational engineering, which that's simply computer simulations in engineering applications like finite element analysis and fun things like that. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I'm an accredited reconstructionist. I was in the Navy from 1984 to 1990. I worked for the Auburn Police Department from 1994 to 1999. And I've been in private reconstruction ever since. I also graduated from Northview High School in 1984, so I grew up in Dothan. One of the things I want to talk about is black box data. That's probably the most volatile thing that's going on, and some of the newer information, newer laws. We call this the 563 rule, which is vehicles made after 9/1 of 2012, that the manufacturer is required to make tools or methods commercially available to download that data. Now, there's a big if in there, and I don't know why they put it in there, but it says if you're recording data, you have to make these methods available. So anything made after 2012. And of course, GM goes back to about 1994 in their coverage. We'll talk about that in a minute. Only applies to vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating of less than 8,500 pounds, which would not include a 3/4 ton truck like an F-250 or an F-350, obviously, but any passenger car, half-ton truck. The Code of Federal Regulations requires you to at least have a process available. The leading manufacturer of the equipment to download the passenger cars is Bosch, and they cover every manufacturer except Kia and Hyundai. They sell their own. Subaru, we don't have a whole lot of experience with those, but apparently they want their dealer network to download Subarus. But everything else, here's your list. And this is as of about 3 days ago. We're up to version 14 in the crash data retrieval. And you can see that it covers just about everything you can think of. You know, I haven't seen a Rolls-Royce yet. It's in here somewhere, Rolls-Royce. But you see GM goes back to 1994, and most of the other manufacturers like Honda started in 2012. But this list, every one of these cars has got something in it, and just every year you get more and more very good data out of these cars. In the early days, it was just an acceleration pulse. Then it got into 5 seconds of pre-crash data, which was vehicle speed, engine RPM, throttle position, and brake switch status. Now we're getting steering wheel angle, which is fantastic. We've already used that in a who was on the wrong side of the road first case. So a lot of the newer cars have steering wheel and stability control, and a lot of good information in these cars. Would highly recommend you not let your car get away if it's got something in this, because the affidavits that I do when cars go away, the gist of the affidavit is that the only way to know what the car was doing before it was leaving any skid marks or before it was off the road is this data. If you want to know what was going on before the crash happened, this is about the only place to get it. I think the battery is going. All right, other sources of data. Now we're going to the heavy trucks. PeopleNet and Qualcomm is electronic onboard recording. They can maintain their logs and talk to central dispatch. So it's things to look at. We'll talk about the engines in a minute. Something that's really coming about in the last year or so are these fleet tracking solutions. And two of the big ones are Virtual Fleet Supervisor and US Fleet Tracking. See if my battery works better. This is a box for a virtual fleet tracker, and I have one of these in my service truck. And you can see that you can mount it under the dash. You'd never know it was there. The only interface is logging on to your account on their website. So you could look in the vehicle and you'd never know it was there. So it's one of those things you're going to have to ask for. I haven't actually tried to get up underneath the dash and look in a truck to prove there wasn't something there, but that's what it is. It's very, very discreet, very easy to hide. Another module is the brake module in a heavy truck. You've got Bendix, Meritor, and Haldex. Bendix and Meritor are primarily the tractors. Haldex is primarily a trailer. ABS. But if you're trying to download or get all of the electronic data in a case, you're going to need the brake module data also. This is a screenshot from my fleet tracking account. You can see here logged in as G. Johnson at Vear Experts. And this is the only way to get the data out of the fleet tracking, is to have the subscriber log on. And it's the same thing with PeopleNet, and it's the same thing with Qualcomm. It's not something a Reconstructionist can come out and plug in their equipment and retrieve. It's something the subscriber has to retrieve. So you can see this is Birmingham. It's not turned on at the time that I did this. But you can map control, device management. You can see reports, speeding, idling, mileage. A lot of good information in here that could be very beneficial if you knew to ask for it and you knew to insist to get it. Another technology that I want to talk about is laser scanning. This is a Faro laser scanner. My company has one of these, and there's another company in Alabama. So there's two of these in the state of Alabama right now. And it's a new technology. It's something that you may want to consider in your next case. What it does is it automatically records about 1 million points per second. What it is, there's a mirror in one end. There's a mirror here, laser comes out and hits the mirror, and it shoots a 360-degree line of points, just like this, and as it rotates 180 degrees. So you could set it up in the middle of this room and turn it on, and in about 10 minutes you would have a three-dimensional drawing of this room. It's very beneficial, very helpful. It takes about the same amount of time, but it gets you a lot more information. The benefits is you would get 30, 40, 50 million points in a scan of this room, but then you can go back to a drawing program and measure the distance between any 2 points. So we can set up something like this on the side of a roadway and scan a roadway, and it actually creates a three-dimensional measurable scan of the road. It gets pretty much everything in line of sight, so there's not a judgment call involved in using it. The same amount of time, but it's 60 million points versus for a site, or 2 million points for a vehicle. I've been using a total station for the prior 15 years, and in the same amount of time you can get 200 to 300 points, but it's, again, you have to site the total station versus just turning the scanner on and letting it go. This is a crash scene done with an older scanner that we had actually borrowed. These are the paint marks and skid marks, or gouge marks, from the crash. A car made a left turn in front of an 18-wheeler. And you can see that you have the marks here. It goes all the way to rest. And you can rotate this in 3 dimensions, look at it, and again, and take any measurements you'd like. It's very helpful. This is a stadium. It's a little bright in here, but we actually set ours up in the middle of a football stadium as part of a warranty claim case we were involved in. And so we got the stadium. Now that's 87 million points from that view. But again, we were tasked with locating various components throughout the stadium. And it probably would have taken a week with a total station. It took us about 6 hours with a scanner.
Did the warranty claim involve writing in stadium?
Maybe. Yes, sir. I've got it so you can't read anything on there. And
was the warranty breached in late November of 2010?
I don't know. I wasn't. It was just my scanner that was used, but I wasn't even there when they did it.
I only asked for that time frame when Auburn came back from
No.
Clearly a breach of warranty.
Okay. Well, and we have several times we've measured goal line to goal line, and it's right at 300 feet. But somebody keeps asking me, well, how is one side of the field shorter than the other? And if it is, we hadn't been able to figure it out. So. But we've measured goal line to goal line several times. It's very handy. You can do the same thing with a car. This is a scan of a car, and it's a cloud of points. So you can put this into a drawing program, orient it from a top-down view. We used to go to great lengths to take overhead pictures of cars with a 20-foot pole and a camera hanging off the top of it on a gimbal, and trying to guess that the camera was directly overhead and taking about 20 pictures for one good one. Well, when you scan a vehicle, you can now rotate it and orient it in any position you want to, including straight down. And again, you can measure the crush. We do a lot of crush calculations. So the scanners have made that a lot better. So that's the technological update, or the technological advantage. This is kind of the future of scanning. That's a four-wheeler. It's kind of a dark picture. This was at a scanner conference in Europe over the summer. That's a four-wheeler. There's your scanner, and then that is a GPS antenna, and that's another GPS antenna. And hopefully sometime soon you'll be able to drive through a crash site with the scanner running and create a 3D representation of your crash scene. So that's kind of the future. That's where we're headed. In the past, why haven't people done this before? Number one, 10 years ago a scanner was $250,000. Now you can look at significantly less than that. The head itself now is about $60,000. So it's come down dramatically. And not just that, the laptops that you need to manipulate these points, that raw Denny Stadium scan is 3 billion points. And each point has an XYZ coordinate, a grayscale value, and then an RGB, or red, green, blue component. So each of those 3 billion points has 7 data points. So you're talking about a tremendous amount of data. But the laptops nowadays have got enough memory to be able to handle that without just completely melting down. We have another project on I-20 that the file size alone is 20 gigabytes. But I don't know if any of y'all do product liability, or Don Tandy, he's basically Ford's Reconstructionist. He's been scanning vehicles for probably 10 years now and has actually written papers that we use on how to do it now. They're quite informative. But yeah, the manufacturers have been scanning vehicles ever since I first started looking at them. So if you're going to want to go up against a manufacturer, you're probably going to want somebody with a scanner. Yeah, and they're a lot more commonplace now. Now I want to go back to the truck data. This is older, but always something we want to try to get out to everybody. In addition to electronic onboard recording and satellite tracking, the engines all record some kind of data. And this is a breakdown. People call me. I wrote an app. I'm not trying to plug it, but I wrote an app called Vin Trucks because I get so many phone calls about, what's this truck got in it? And it's not chassis dependent. A chassis would be Freightliner or Volvo or Peterbilt or Kenworth. That's a chassis. It's engine dependent, and you can put just about any engine in just about any truck. So I need to know what engine is in there. So I actually wrote a program. It's an Apple app called Vin Trucks, where you enter the VIN and it will tell you the year and make of the truck, and it will also tell you the engine. And then based on the year the truck was made and the engine that was in it, it'll give you an idea of the crash data that's in there. And that app is 99 cents. So I've sold maybe less than 1,000 copies of it, but worldwide. It's in use worldwide. And I know people at the NTSB that use it.
What's the name of the app?
Vin Trucks, V-I-N Trucks. Like I said, you enter the VIN, and then there's a link in there where you can email that output to me or to yourself or whoever you want to. A lot of people have it, and I try to keep it up to date. Because when you're looking at these trucks, this is basically what you need to know if you've got information in a truck. Of course, 94 Caterpillar, 2005 and up Cummins, 98 and up Detroit or Mercedes, 2012 Internationals, 98 Max. Now, at some point around, I don't know, late 2000, Volvo bought Mack. So any Volvo made after December of 2010 is going to behave just like a Mack. And I don't know if you've been through it or not. You have to get the data access just like you do a Mack, which involves pulling the modules and sending them to one of 2 affiliates in the United States that can download Macks. And that's Delta V in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Kiva Engineering out in California. And you'll literally have to pull out, for a Volvo or a Mack, you have to pull out the instrument panel. You have to pull out another little box that's under the fuse box called the Vehicle Electronic Control Unit, and then you have to pull the one off the side of the engine, which is the Engine Electronic Control Unit. So you have to pull 3 modules out of this Volvo or Mack and send off. The reason for the instrument panel is that's where the clock is. So you've got the clock, you've got the crash data in the Vehicle Electronic Control Unit, and you've got the engine calibration in the Engine Electronic Control Unit. So you've got to pull out 3 modules and send them off, and a check for about $3,000. And then PACCAR, which is Kenworth and Peterbilt's parent company, started building their own engines in 2010, and they're an option in the 2010 and later Kenworth and Peterbilt's. You can still get a Cummins engine in it, in Kenworth and Peterbilt's too. But their equipment is dealer only. We'll talk about that. They're relaxing a little bit, but I've been downloading these four, well, mainly these three, Caterpillar, Cummins, and Detroit Diesel. I went to the Detroit Diesel School in 2003 or 2004. So I've had to go to all three, Detroit, Cummins, and Caterpillar's engine schools before they would sell a private reconstructionist the calibration equipment that's required just to access the data that's in there. They're getting a little bit better, but it used to be you'd go to an engine manufacturer and say, you know, I want your CAT ET is the name of the Caterpillar equipment, and they'd say, why do you want to do this? Because you can, if you don't know what you're doing, you can get in there and wreak havoc with it when you're just trying to get crash data. But so they're starting to relax a little bit on this dealer only. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. My big soapbox, and I do this for the trucking companies, I do this for the insurance companies, only have trained reconstructionists retrieve electronic data. The shops, you know, they're much better diesel mechanics than I am. They're better at interpreting fault codes, and they can get in there and fix it a lot better than I can. But we're looking for an entirely different, we've got different goals. I'm trying to get crash-related data out without ruining anything or resetting anything, and they're just resetting fault codes and fixing the engine. Number one, not all relevant data is printable. You've got to take screenshots. You've got to have a paint program or a Word program you can paste these screenshots into, or you won't have it. And like I said, not all of it's printable. You've got to have some way of saving it. Another thing is most shops literally just have a hard printer. They don't have any way of printing to PDF. When we do data extractions, we print everything to PDF and then put that on a jump drive and distribute that jump drive. More than likely a shop will just hand you a readout. And some of these readouts can be 100 pages long, and then the odds of keeping up with every page are pretty remote. I get partial downloads frequently that we either have to go download the truck again or we have to track down the original files. Some of this software is set. When you install it, there are default settings that you need to fix, or you can reset data or update data, and we'll talk about that. And then there's also, a couple of them have proprietary files that you need to save that other reconstructionists with the same software can open those files, but in addition to printing the PDFs. We're going to talk about Cummins. They're nice enough to color code the engines. A lot of times if someone's looking at a truck and they don't know, I'll ask what color is it, because there really are, for the most part, the engines are color coded. Cummins, generally red. Some of the older ones are black, but most Cummins are red. The software, now you need two software programs to download a Cummins. Insight is the first one, and that's what the dealers have. They can do calibration, fault codes, trips, and audits. That's what the dealers have. PowerSpec is the second software program you need to download a Cummins, and it's free. It's a sales tool intended for the owners. Not all dealers have it, and not only that, they're not interested in it because it doesn't help them do their job. It's just a nuisance to them. But if you want the crash data out of a Cummins, PowerSpec is what you're going to need. And it is necessary to retrieve the sudden decelerations or download what's called road relay in a Cummins truck. You won't get crash data out of a Cummins if all you're using is Insight. So that's, you know, most or all reconstructionists are going to have Insight and PowerSpec. An example of some of the things that the shop won't do is in a Cummins, kind of unique to them, is you can create an image of the ECM, and these are images I've created over the years. And it is a virtual copy of the ECM that you could, at some later time, start up your Cummins software, load that image, and it's just like you're virtually connected to an ECM. So you want to save that image. Another reconstructionist or the opposing side is going to want to see that. So you need to know, number one, how to create the work order or the image, and then you have to export it to an external file, something a shop's never going to do. Another big booby trap I see is expanding fields. Here's a fault out of a Cummins. You fault code, and you've got 4 inactive fault codes, and you've got over here you see these pluses. Well, if you print this page, it's going to print just like this. But if you expand it, you see the 3753 is the top one. There's 3753. If you expand it, now you've got all of the data and parameters associated with that fault code. So if you're trying to try a fault code to a crash, you're going to need this information. And you see this is there's 15 more pages after we expanded that field. So again, that's Cummins. Notice on a Cummins, this is a sudden deceleration out of power spec. Again, you wouldn't get it out of Insight. Nowhere on here is the date and time of the event. The 3306 is there and 3306 is there. That's the date that we pulled the data out. Cummins is not going to have a timestamp. We have to go off of occurrence distance or total engine runtime and look at the event. And if you drive the truck a couple hundred miles, you're going to lose that. Tying the crash back to that occurrence is going to get difficult. You're going to have to pretty much account for every mile that the truck's driven. Here's what a sudden deceleration looks like in a Cummins, and they're all pretty much like this. Vehicle speed, it's just a countdown from -59 to 0, and then about 15 seconds after. Your vehicle speed, engine load, throttle, brakes, clutch. Lamp is fault code. And Detroit, again, software is called DL, is the common term for it, Detroit Diesel Diagnostic Link. Works with Detroit Diesel and Mercedes. There's small differences. Like Mercedes does not have an audit trail. Here's one of the biggest booby traps or pitfalls that I see in all of the heavy truck software is in the Detroit Diesel software. And the default settings are to reset the trips in the clock. So if you download it, you didn't change any of the default information, there'll be zeros on the next download. When a person goes to look at the trips, the miles will be 0, the gas used will be 0. And you're going to have to recreate it. Then the other big one is it'll update the clock automatically, but you can go to the audit trail and see where the clock was changed, except Mercedes don't have audit trails. Here's what it looks like in the software, local extractions. This reset trip, reset clock, those are checked as part of the default installation of the software. Here's a configuration report. This is about the 4th page of the extraction file. And what I wanted to show you here is if you have it set to where you're not resetting the data, this will show up on the bottom of the 3rd or 4th page. And it says 4 extracted but did not reset. So whenever I get a download, that's one of the first things I look for. The extraction file, that's a proprietary file that's out of DDEC reports. And it's a function of the date. And the extraction file is the one in the Detroit Diesel that has the speed in it. That's the one you're looking for. The file name is a function of the date. And more than once I've had to go to a shop, convince them to let me look through every one of their shop computers looking for a particular extraction file, because either they didn't print the whole thing or the whole thing didn't make it to the end, or the person that needed it at the end. And if you've got a shop with multiple computers, like most of them have 4, 5, or 6 computers, I have to go to every one of their computers and try to find this extraction file, whereas a Reconstructionist would know to preserve that. If you have a printed one, in the bottom left corner, that will be the name of the extraction file. It should be printed on the bottom left. So that's when I'm at the shop looking for it, that's the file I'm looking for. This extraction file, here's another. This is the first page of the extraction file. Another common problem is if they hit print, you're going to get the first page. You have to hit print all and then check all, or you're not going to get this. And what you're looking for is right here, last stop record, hard brake record, and that's about 20 pages in. And if you just hit print, you're going to get the first page. Like I said, the printed file on the extraction file should be about 35 pages. Another proprietary file is called the calibration data file, also in DL. Calibration data file. You can print the calibration, but you also want to save the calibration. This will give us VSS, vehicle speed sensor, speed limit. Those are parameters we're looking for. Set ECM clock. The Detroit Diesel is nice enough to timestamp things, but the clocks on these things are notorious. I think the factory spec on clock drift is 4 hours a year. So you may very well have an incident, but the date and time doesn't make any sense. So to document this, what you have to do is pull up set ECM clock. You have current PC time, current ECM time, and you have to screen print this so you can document what we call clock drift. So now you can go back and find out if the event recovered really is your event or not. All right, Caterpillar, they quit making engines in 2009. The mechanics that I would talk to said that they were convinced that the air that was coming out of their engines was cleaner than the air that was going in. 99% of Caterpillar's business is earth movers and off-highway vehicles, so they just told the EPA they could have their rules. So they quit making highway engines in 2009. But we still see a lot of Caterpillars out there. We downloaded a 2007 yesterday. So here's same problem with not expanding values in Caterpillar. If you don't expand this, you can see I did this at 6:45 p.m. You don't expand it, you don't get any values. If you expand it, 6:47, I expanded it, now you've got values in here, and things that you're going to need in here are going to be hard brake threshold and governor settings, things you need to know. Caterpillars record their events in what's called a snapshot viewer. This trips up a lot of people. Here's snapshots that are in this particular module. You have to hit View Data, and it'll take you to this page. And I've seen this page printed a lot. I don't know why Caterpillar chose to do it like this, but you have a play bar down here where you can hit play, and it will literally play the values across and change the values here. But printing this one page doesn't help you at all. But if you click Save to File, then you can save it, and then you can export it into Excel. Then you can put those parameters in Excel, and that's about the only way to get the snapshot data out of a Caterpillar in any way that you can read it or understand what you're looking at. If you save the snapshot file, to play it again, you would need CAT-ET, which is about a $1,200 a year subscription. So sharing that kind of data without exporting it to Excel would be very difficult. Again, clock drift is important, so you've got to screenshot. This is the set the clock page from Caterpillar, and here you have to pull up your Windows clock and screen print that. International is fairly new to the market. These Max Force engines. The software is Service Max Fleet Pro, and here's what the International looks like. Again, it's really the same parameters, just displayed a little differently. They output their events in Excel. It's 105 seconds, but instead of columns of information, it's rows. So you got 105, 104, and then so you're looking left to right. We actually will transpose the columns and rows to make it look a little easier and easier to read. But again, International, this is 2010, 2012. So it's got good data. Mac and Volvo, we already talked about that. That's the module on a Mac. Actually, that's a Volvo engine. But that's the engine electronic control unit. And they're a lot of fun because the two electrical connectors and then that little round part right there is actually, it's cooled by diesel fuel because it's basically a computer bolted to the side of an 18-wheel engine. So these things are cooled by diesel fuel. It can be very messy. But again, I said call Delta V or Kiva and write them a check for about $3,000. By contrast, people send me ECMs from all over the country, and I charge $500. So that's the difference between a couple hundred reconstructionists doing the same thing and two companies doing the same thing. Max, some of them require, the parking brake to be set to record the last stop. It was an unintentional feature of some of the Macs. So if you get a download that doesn't make any sense, or you've got a case where you think, well, certainly there had to have been data written, call me or call someone that deals with these trucks, and we can walk you through, why it did what it did. We call this an elegant shutdown, which means you have to stop the truck, set the brakes, and turn the switch off in order for it to write data. Now, they're not doing it now, but there's a small year range in there that is doing that. And it's just a disconnect in between the computer programmers and the engineers at Mac. Here's Mac configuration, same as the rest. And Mac, of course, most of the other heavy trucks go out a minute or 2 minutes. Mac is 15.8 seconds, but instead of 1 second intervals, it's 0.2 second intervals. And then Pack Car, like we talked about, these engines are actually made in Columbus, Mississippi. Davy is the name of their software package, and it's dealer only as far as I know. There may be, like I said, they're starting to relax on that, but I don't really know the status right now. We don't run across that many. When the shop prints it out for you, this is what it's going to look like. First off, they printed it for me in metric. It's not that hard to print it in English, but they did it in metric. And then you've got A, B, C, D, E, F corresponds to a parameter. And then L, M, and N are also different parameters. So we have to sort all this out, and we sort this out and put it in Excel so you can read it, and this is what it looks like. So you got clutch pedal, cruise control. And over here on the far right, you've got vehicle speed. But there is data there. And then we've also changed it to miles per hour over here, even though it was initially recorded in metric and not translated. Some of the trends that I'm seeing, and I think Mac touched on this. Yeah, I work for both sides. The rule is whoever calls first. That's basically my rule. By request, I gave a talk at the 2013 Truckload Carriers Association in Indianapolis on that topic, and that's getting reconstructionists to the scene absolutely as quickly as you can, regardless of what it looks like. So see that more and more. I have a crew up in some pass in Fort Payne right now on a UPS wreck that happened this morning. So it's gone from maybe once a year I'd be on the scene before the vehicle's removed. Now it's 6 or 8 times a year, and it's probably just going to keep getting faster.
Where do your people come from? I mean, are they
Sir?
Huh?
Well, I'm sorry?
Where do your people come from? Are they local people you got everywhere, or just mechanics?
No, no, this is just us. We're in Birmingham. There's about 10 of us. The wreck was in Fort Payne. I was halfway here, and they called and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to Dothan. Yeah. Well, ironically, I'll show you. I've actually got a visual for that. But it's pretty much a 250 to 300 mile radius of Birmingham. Yeah, we'll get to that. And this was a big mess on I-20 in Heflin over the summer, and that's me and one of my guys. They had I-20 shut down for 8 hours, and we were out there shortly after daybreak. So the trend is there. There were 4 18-wheelers involved in that wreck, but I was the only one that there wasn't any other reconstructionist for any of the other 18-wheelers showed up. So that leads me to this, and I get this a lot. So that they didn't download the truck, should they have known? At this point, yeah, they should have known. And this is the oldest paper I can find, is this DOT paper from 2005 that recommends monitoring and recording parameters in accident reconstruction. And it actually recommends downloading trucks just as soon as you can. It's almost to the point, and it is. A lot of these trucks, they'll record 2 different things will write an event, either a hard brake, which is a rapid change in wheel speed, and then they'll also record a last stop, which means if you get over, with Detroit, it's vehicle speed over 1.5 miles an hour and engine speed over 0. So RPM greater than 0, 1.5 miles an hour. You move it, stop it, you've written a new last stop. Well, in a lot of low-speed accidents, like where a truck is pulling out from a stop or making a U-turn, something along those lines, you're not going to get a hard brake. They set hard brake threshold. The minimum speed to set a hard brake in most trucks is 10 miles an hour greater than the threshold. And the threshold is that rapid change in wheel speed, which is 7 miles per hour per second, is general. So now you're talking about a minimum speed of 17 miles an hour to ride a hard brake. But so you're not likely going to do that coming out from a stop sign if he stopped, but you will have that last stop. Well, the problem is if the trailer is involved in a crash, you can drive the truck from the scene. But if you drive the truck from the scene, you're going to lose that last stop. So we are telling the companies, the trucking companies, to have the truck towed from the scene without the motor running. We're telling them that. Some of them are hearing us, some of them aren't, but they're being told. So the only way to preserve that last stop if your truck is drivable. Anyway, 2005. I've got a copy of that. If you can't find it, it's buried. But I've got a copy of it. Yes?
For someone who might not be as ethical as you are, is there a way?
I've been fired a lot, especially defense guys.
Is there a way to manipulate this data
Well, I'll start with cars. The cars, you can open a car's proprietary file in Notepad, but if you tamper with that file, Bosch has built-in safeguards. Now, somebody who's an absolute genius with computers may be able to, but technically no, or typically. That is one reason it's with the cars. It's very important to preserve the actual, it's called a CDRX file that comes out of a car. You need to preserve that because you can print the PDF of the CDR file out of a car, but then I can make a PDF say anything I want it to. So that's why proprietary file preservation is so important. It's really important in the cars. Now with the trucks, you would have to, try to think, the extraction file, like with a Detroit diesel, where you save the extraction file and it prints out, you're just going to have a PDF printout, and again, there's virtually no security in PDFs. But as long as going back to having that actual extraction file would be a good thing. But I'm thinking of trucks that don't really have that, like the printout from the pack car and the international trucks like that. It's probably best in some of those cases to have your own Reconstructionist download the data. But again, I know you guys are at the mercy of the clients, so I know that you're usually behind. Did I answer your question for the most part?
What you did is say there might be a way, and if I ever think it might be going on, I need to hire somebody who knows a lot more than I do to help me figure it out.
Yeah, and Alabama is one of the most competitive states. There's 6 or 7 reconstruction companies in Alabama, and I know 5 of us have most of the same equipment. So you've got a lot of people. And down here, you're not that far from Tallahassee or Pensacola, and there's good guys in both of those. So you guys are pretty well located for Reconstructionists. All right, this is my last little thing I want to do, and it's just to give you a demonstration. Some of you may know about this, but and I couldn't resist taking a jab at Steve Jobs. But we talked about the monitoring and the tracking and phones, and I just wanted to show you what your phone is doing. If you've got an iPhone and you've never heard this before, why don't you take it out? I know, who's Amy? I know there's a lady named Amy in here somewhere. Hey, Amy. I could see your phone on the Wi-Fi network. But you've got an iPhone. If you're not using it right now, why don't you follow along with me and go to Settings, and then Privacy, which is at the bottom. Let me see. Settings, Privacy, bottom of the 3rd group. Are you with me? The very first time I did this, a bunch of people pulled me aside and said, okay, show us how to turn that off. And then go to Location Services, which is at the top. And then go to the very bottom, which is System Services. Are you with me? And then Frequent Locations. And you should have a list of, you should have something that says History, and at the bottom of the History you should have one that says United States. If you click on United States, you should have something that looks like this. And that's everywhere I've been in the last month. So there's my footprint, sir. That's everywhere I've been in the last 30 days. And what... Let me see. Yeah, click Frequent Locations. Yeah, yours isn't. Is that a new phone?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just click on the last one and it'll show you. No, click on You Follow. There you go. And then see, it'll show you you're at Lake Point State Park. Yeah, and it'll say when you got there and when you left, depending on the version of software you have.
I was at a seminar there 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been like that for the better part of 2 years.
Off the Wi-Fi system, you have to click on the Wi-Fi because I like into the Wi-Fi for location.
Yeah, it does work better with Wi-Fi enabled.
It didn't work on my dad's network.
Okay. Yeah, that's the usual response. I gotta turn this off.
It doesn't give hotels unless you use it.
Yeah. As you can see, I had a deposition in Nashville. It got me there. That's Forsyth, Georgia, and Pensacola. But so, any questions? Yes, sir.
Let's take just for the purposes of discussion of all those trucks.
Yes, sir.
18-liter cab trucks. How much does that cost?
I went to a class in California 4 or 5 years ago now that was sponsored by the Mac guys, and they had a brand new Volvo out there for us to play with. It had a sleeper, big, over long road, long haul unit, and a sticker on it was $130,000.
How many miles would it get if it's maintained properly and no really rebuild engine and transmission or anything like that?
The most miles I've ever seen on a truck is about 3 million. Most trucking companies lease their trucks, and they'll put about 1 million miles on them and then lease a new batch.
So you said what the price was?
130,000.
That's pretty good return, I mean, I would think.
Yeah.